Hey guys, first Regardsman here, and I'll be talking about the best Salamander's Power Sword build for every single class setup in Space Marine 2 Patch 14. Now, the Heroic Salamander's Sword is, in my opinion, the strongest Power Sword in the game, or very close to being that. It's really only between this one, the Block Power Sword, and the Xenophase Blade, but personally, I think this one is over Xenophase, and the only real contender is the Block Power Sword. But as far as this weapon's perk effect goes, we have the perk effect Nocturne's Retort, Perfect Parry to empower the blade and deal 300% more damage with the next light attack and speed style, hold up to 6 in power stacks. The parry window is smaller. So the way this weapon works is that after you get a perfect parry, you will gain 3 in power stacks, and every light attack and speed style you do after that will spend 1 in power stack and get that 300% damage bonus. Now, there is unfortunately no way to tell how many in power stacks you actually have at a given time, but every time you perfect parry, you will get that, so just keep that in mind. You have to personally count it yourself. That does kind of suck, but hopefully in the future they kind of remedy that. But as far as this weapon's overall attack power goes, the 300% damage bonus here, that comes out to be about as strong as a power rake with cutting edge and overcharge at times. It is a very strong ability, and the big benefit here is that when you perfect parry an enemy in Space Marine 2, you will apply a 50% damage taken debuff to them for 2 seconds, and you can very easily slip in 1 or 2 light attacks and speed style during that window with that 300% buff. So the buff actually comes out to be even more to the enemies, because usually most weapon attacks cannot take full advantage of that debuff window, but this one definitely can. So really strong option. And as far as the parry window is concerned, the parry window on this is identical to a block weapon, so it will give you a gun strike because it's a fencing weapon, but the smaller window here just means you have the same active frames as a block weapon. So not too bad, definitely usable, just keep that in mind. Now, as far as the best perk tree setup for this goes, I think it's as follows. I start off with Armored Strength first for a 10% damage buff with any armor remaining, then move here into the perk Master of Offense. After you switch your sword combat style, you'll deal 20% more melee damage for 5 seconds with a cooldown of 10 seconds, because you may be wondering, why would we want a 20% buff on switching our sword combat style? Are we only using the speed style? Well, the thing is, on a power sword, the way this weapon works is that you'll kind of be swapping your power styles no matter what. It really does not matter if this is a purely light style combo on the speed style, because when you use your dodge on this weapon, you are able to hold down your melee button and immediately go into a lunging attack on the alternative stance, which means you'll be swapping all the time. You'll be triggering this buff, and swapping back to that speed style while you have in power stacks is not that difficult. So really strong option here, and definitely better than Master of Defense down here for range damage reduction. Next perk here is Perpetual Strength, and down here into the perk Perpetual Strength again. Now, I do skip over Momentum Gain because this perk is just not worth taking. First of all, the investment here, the perks on this row are just not as good as the perks down here, even for this weapon, and Momentum Gain has to build up to its maximum damage, and usually you will never reach that 30%, and the perk down here, Melee Onslaught, will give you a 10% melee damage buff instead flat, which will affect all of your attacks, not just your speed style ones on those light attacks. So definitely a strong option here, and I would say Melee Onslaught also just builds into better perks in general, like the perk here, Hard Target, for 15% less range damage while performing a light combo, because this weapon is all about light combos, and the most important perk, which is of course Cutting Edge, for a 50% damage buff to our power rakes, because this is still worth taking on this blade, and it's way better than Reeling Blow. As far as the final perks are concerned, ones I would skip over here are Power Restoration and the perk down here, Minoru Slayer. You really do not need the extra Minoru damage at all, and Power Restoration for double CHP recovery and power style, that's pretty good, but Speed Restoration is definitely better, because having those speed style attacks give you double CHP recovery. That's actually pretty strong on this one, because you'll be using those way more often. As far as the damage perks go, we take a catch all of Extremis Slayer, Majora Slayer, and Terminus Slayer, and that's pretty much the best setup for this one, and I think that's really the best setup for 99% of power swords, if you just swap this little thing to Power Restoration. Now, as far as the class setup goes for the Assault, I think Assault can take full advantage of not only gun strike damage on this, but also things like armor reinforcement. You do not need the perk Overcharge on this build. Damage from held and charged melee attacks increases by 25%, because your light styles are so strong, you can actually just take armor reinforcement instead for no real DPS loss, even if those power rakes are usually worth a lot more. The next perk I would take here is really your choice of Defense Mechanism, Auxiliary Arsenal, or Consecutive Execution, but Consecutive Execution is the overall best because Equipment in Space Marine 2 is just that strong. The next perk you can take here is Active Attrition or Knowledge of the Enemy. This is really up to your personal preference, but because of the way the Power Sword works and Wings of Flame works, I would pretty much always take Active Attrition because applying a 25% damage taken debuff for 5 seconds on a lunging attack will happen all the time, and that will buff up your Power Sword speed style attacks even further for a ton of extra damage. The next perk here is Strategic Strikes for pure damage, and alternatively you could pick up Proven Efficiency because in patch 14, the honorific Relative Bolt Pistol, this has equivalent gunstrike damage to the Firepower Bolt Pistol, so really strong to just do a ton of damage on the gunstrike on top of ammo economy and general firepower damage. I also want to mention that the next perk here, Furious Strikes, enemy's attack after a jump pack dash or jump pack split charged by 1, cooldown is 10 seconds. This will be applying Active Attrition because this counts as a lunging attack, so Furious Strikes, a super powerful option to keep up your jump pack. And the next perk here, Wings of Flame, a jump pack dash damages enemies on trajectory and always versus a perfect dodge and dodging attack. This is just the best perk on the Assault class right now for operations and hard strats. It overperforms all the time. It is also very strong against the new Chaos Terminator Sorcerer boss because he has very long melee combos, so really good option for both factions. Next perk here is Aerial Grace. After a perfect time dodge using a jump pack dash, you will deal 30% more damage for 10 seconds. A 30% damage buff here to your melee attacks and range attacks is super strong on the Salamander sword, so a really good synergy overall of the gear tree. Final perk here is Commitment for free jump packs on a perfect dodge, which is really what you want with a Wings of Flame build. And that's all there really is for the best setup on the Assault in terms of its perk tree. As far as other secondary options go, I would say if you're fighting Chaos, the Inferno Pistol and the Plasma Pistol, really any variant you want, these can be much better than Bolter options, only because having a stagger option against minigun Terminators, that will save you a ton in this game, because if you shoot a charged shot at a minigun guy or an Inferno Pistol shot, you will stagger them and interrupt that volley immediately, so really valuable for them. And also the contested health recovery on this option is very strong, so just keep in mind Chaos, these are definitely better, but for Tyranids I'd probably take this. Now as far as the Prestige perk options go, it's pretty standard. Unyielding Oath is still the best option overall in my opinion, because Invulnerability gives you a ton of utility, and Fortitude for health increase of 15%. This is just a top tier perk in general in every class you can find it on. And the final perks are your choice of like Scramble Targeting and Practice Aim, and of course Hammer of Wrath, because 30% range damage reduction with a no knockback of 15 seconds is just too good to not take on like any Assault build these days. And that's pretty much all there is for the Assault class. Now for the Bulwark class, you set up your Salamander's Power Sword the same way as the Assault, and this is really just the best setup overall for this weapon in my opinion. And also this class takes huge advantage of the defense type fencing window here, where your perk Intimidating Aura, if you get this free damage on the perfect parry and just do like 2 light attacks, you will put like any Majoris in the game to execute with no gun strike and no animation lock, which is super strong. Intimidating Aura is already like a god tier perk in the game, so it's not that surprising. It's really strong here, just like it is with the normal fencing sword, but Intimidating Aura, I would 100% take this every single time on the Bulwark build. Next perk I take here is Scramble Targeting. Moving here to the perk Steel Within. When your health's less than 50%, you will take 30% less health damage. I think this is the overall more valuable perk on Bulwark versus Armor Reinforcement, because Focus Restoration already gives you armor to your entire team every 30 seconds, which is really strong on its own. And this is mostly top tier against the Tyranids, but the damage reduction here, this will save your life in like the most brutal stun locks. It's also way better against Chaos. So if you want to take Armor Reinforcement, you definitely can, but Steel Within is definitely better overall. Next perk here is Focus Restoration. Every 30 seconds, all team members automatically restore 1 armor segment. This is the best team perk for Bulwark by far. Advanced Conditioning, I know a lot of players like this. This is a good perk. This one is just too much value to not take. It is 100% damage reduction against melee attacks for incredibly squishy classes like TAC and Techmarine, and it's also just helping you out as well, so it's just such a high value perk that it just fits right into the best build for the Salamander sword. Next perk here is Purity of Purpose. What was I saying? Purity of Purpose. The banner deals damage over time to enemies with its area of effect. This basically puts down a shock nade around your banner, and this thing is once again the best perk in this column. I know some people like Rapid Regeneration. This perk kind of sucks. The only thing this is actually helping you with is against range attacks, but for the most part, any amount of armor remaining in Space Marine 2 will reduce all of your melee damage to 0 that you take, so having a faster regen on that does not matter because the banner already recharges pretty quickly, and also this reduces the duration of your banner to 10, and a 10-second duration is half of your total banner duration, so you are getting like a shit tier value out of this banner perk here. And also Purity of Purpose will just do ridiculous amounts of damage on its own to Majoris, Extremis, and bosses, so I would definitely pick this up, and also just wipe out Minoris. Super high value perk. Next perk here is Invigorating Icon. When the banner is activated, all team members regain maximum contested health, but it recharges 50% slower. Now, Concussive Force is very strong, but this is a low total damage weapon where the base damage here is Strength 11, and the 300% bonus here is not applied to your Shield Bash. So if you're trying to use Concussive Force, I don't think the Salamander's Power Sword is for that. You're much better off just taking a Block Power Axe where this damage is kind of ludicrous. So if you want the healing perk is definitely the best on the Bulwark because it just breaks the pickup economy on the game if you are not using Concussive Force, and full healing your entire team. I mean, come on guys, like it's a pretty obviously cracked perk. It has been since launch, and even after they nerfed it to have a 50% slower recharge, it's still a top tier option. Now the alternative option is Gory Shield. This one's super fun to use and does have its upsides occasionally, but this one's overall better in my opinion. Next perk here is Merciless Resolve. After a Shield Bash, Shield Rush, or Thunder Hammer Pommel Smash, melee damage increases by 15%. You know, those control heavy hits, you cannot be knocked back for 10 seconds. Now, this perk is just free no knockback. All you have to do to trigger this perk is just Shield Bash the air. You don't actually have to hit anyone at all. Just keep in mind to reapply the perk effect, you have to wait for the 10-second duration to be up. And also you get a free melee damage buff, so that's pretty nice. Now the next perk here that we take because we don't need Armor Advance is of course Defensive Mastery. Perfect time parry or block instantly incapacitates Majoris or Extremis level enemy. The cooldown is 90 seconds. So this perk is super strong. The only downside is that the way the damage stacks in this game is that this perk will trigger first, and then Intimidating Aura will trigger, which means you put the guy into the execute stance, and then Intimidating Aura just one-shots them. So you don't actually get the execute off of that, which does kind of suck sometimes, but being able to instantaneously incapacitate an Extremis in a boss fight, that will just save your life sometimes. Like, this perk is super undervalued for a long time by the player base, and this will just do a ton of work on its own, even without that awkward interaction. Now, for the prestige perk options here, if you are not taking if you're not taking a plasma pistol, I should say, do not take this perk, because Auxiliary Reload will only give you back 1 magazine per Extremis kill in melee, and that's pretty good, but on the plasma, it's just way better because plasma's more ammo hungry, and also this doesn't go on a magazine size on plasma, it goes on a percentage base of the total ammunition in the weapon. So because of that, if you're taking a plasma pistol, just pick up this perk, and if you're not, just skip over it for the next perk here, Resilience instead. Medicaid seems for 40% more HP. Moving here to the perk Overcharge for a 20% multiplicative melee damage buff to your power rake. So this is still worth taking on this weapon here because it's pretty much free on the Bulwark. Like, Bulwark doesn't have to do anything to get like the full benefit of Overcharge, unlike Assault and Techmarine. So I would just pick this up for your power rakes. And the next perk here is Powerful Shot, and the final perk here is Masterful Defense for ability charge being restored by 1% for every blocked range attack, because this CDR is just kind of cracked. And if you put this on a minigun Terminator, you'll just get your banner back entirely. An entire banner here just means full HP. So a really good perk effect. Everybody knows about this one though, but gotta say it again, top tier effect. Now, as far as the secondary goes, if you're fighting Chaos, I would just take a Rate of Fire Plasma. The Plasma is super strong against Chaos because Chaos does not need the headshot multiplier for the more annoying enemies, stuff like Zangors and stuff like that, just shoot them out of the sky. The AoE here is very strong for stagger against the Rubric Marines and especially the minigun Terminators, and the ammo economy is not that bad, and the CHP recovery is very high. Now, as far as the build setup goes for Rate of Fire Plasma, it's pretty much the same as always. Just go down the top tree, pick up Blast Radius, Perpetual Velocity, Efficient Charge, into the perk here, Perfect Cooling, Plasma Collection again down here into Divine Might, and for Tyranids, I would definitely pick up like an ammo reserve on the heavy bolt pistol here, or in my opinion, which is the best bolt pistol, is the honorific relic tier bolt pistol, because at the moment this one has the highest gun strike damage of like normal bolt pistol options outside of things like the heroic heavy bolt pistol, and is tied for highest gun strike damage with the relic tier firepower heavy bolt pistol. So really good value here, really good ammo economy, and for the perk tree on this, I've set it up this way. And that's pretty much all there is for the Bulwark class. Now for the Techmarine class, just like I said for his strongest build in the entire game for patch 14, the heroic plasma and heroic heavy bolt rifle, these are just kind of top tier options on him no matter what. And the main difference here is our Salamander's power sword, which we'll be building around, which does change up the perk tree a little bit. Now as far as the Salamander's power sword is concerned, this one is set up the same way as the assault and Bulwark, and the heroic heavy bolt rifle is also set up the same way as we had in the strongest builds guide, where we take extended magazine restoration here, cleaving fire into the perk hero mode threat. Then we go into great might, increased capacity, headhunter, recoupment, rapid health, perpetual penetration into divine might, and extended magazine, because this is like the best catch-all for like grenade launcher damage and bolter damage, and you also get a ton of ammo, which this class definitely likes. Now as far as the secondary is concerned, the heroic plasma is very strong for damage nuking potential. However, if you want to have a faster CHP recovery without using your grenade launcher portion, because this does have pretty limited ammo in the operation sometimes, you can definitely take a rate of fire plasma. This can be a bit better for that, and I'll just go down the top tree over here and just pick up the perk Divine Might. But as far as the heroic plasma is concerned, I think building for one-shot damage here is the best possible option, where we take plasma collection into the perk here rapid cooling, then I grab plasma collection again, blast radius, perpetual velocity, plasma collection again, and then we pick up blast radius into retaliation and divine might for just full damage. This also pairs very well with the perk over here, long range barrage, where if you do get that 25% buff from like 20 meters away and you arc your shot here on the heroic plasma, you will do a tremendous amount of damage. A really strong option for him, and I think it's one of the better options on the Techmarine in general, which is why I put it in my strongest builds guide. Now as far as the perk tree setup goes, precision enhancement, this is just the best possible servo gun in patch 14 for operations and hard strats. I mean, being able to fire off these sniper shots, they will one-shot zoanthropes, they will do tremendous damage to like every single extremis in the game. The only one they're kind of annoying to use against are the biovores, because biovores take way less damage while planted. But that being said, it is a very powerful tool, especially if you combine it over here with lethal perimeter. Now as far as the other perk selections go here, the big benefit of the Salamander's power sword is we get to take the Omniscient Axe Deflection or Methodical Destruction, because unlike these standard power swords on this class or things like the Xenophase Blade, you don't need to take Arc Cleave. You do not need this multiplicative melee damage buff, because your light attacks on a perfect parry are so damn strong already, and there's actually a really good synergy with this weapon here and the Techmarine in general, which is that after a perfect parry, you will be able to servo gunstrike animation free and trigger perk effects over here like Furious Gunstrikes for 25% more melee damage for 5 seconds, and basically just get to slam into them with this buff active and also stagger them, and also get that debuff for the damage taken for 2 seconds on a perfect parry, and that 300% buff on your speed style attacks in Nocturne's Retort. So a really good option for him overall, and doesn't force us to take Arc Cleave. So the other perk option here is of course Methodical Destruction. I don't think this one is as good as Omniscient Axe Deflection, because a 25% range damage reduction for 10 seconds on a perfect parry or perfect block, this is a super strong perk effect. I mean, Techmarine does not have a lot of HP in Space Marine 2 in the first place, so having a range damage reduction that affects your armor, not just your HP, and also having extra sources of armor restoration like Battlefield Repairs and Fortifying Salvo, that is super strong for your class synergy. I think Omniscient Axe Deflection is very strong here, just like the Argent Edge that also doesn't need to take the Arc Cleave perk at all. Now, the next perk here is still Long Range Barrage. I think this is just the best option for the Heroic Plasma and like really any build on this class, because the Long Range Barrage damage buff is just tremendous. Though if you want to take Push the Advantage or things like Explosives Adept, you definitely can. I just think the range damage buff here is too good to not take. Next perk here is Battlefield Repairs. This perk is definitely too good to not take, Team members restore one additional armor segment for finishers on Majoris or Extremis enemies. The amount of value this perk actually generates is kind of nuts in the operations because extra armor just keeps your entire team alive. 2 armor is so much better than 1 for like trying to survive range attacks and just annoying random damage effects. So this really helps out your Techmarine way more than you'd think initially. Next perk here is an actionable salvo. While the servo gun is active, you don't lose control for heavy hits, cannot be knocked back. The effect lasts 15 seconds after deactivation. This is a very strong perk effect for no knockback, and keep in mind, with the lethal perimeter perk, you can just shoot your lethal perimeter down for no cooldown cost at all if you turn it off immediately and don't shoot a single shot, so like shoot it into a roof or something, and trigger this perk effect for 15 seconds, pretty much 24/7. That's a little annoying to do, you don't have to play it that way, but it's definitely an option. It's also an option up here for the perk counter-offensive protocols, which says after using the servo gun, melee damage increases by 35% for 10 seconds, and that will also trigger just like this perk off of lethal perimeter, but this one's a little bit worse than another option I'll get into. Next perk here is replenishing salvo. Killing or passing an enemy with a servo gun restores one equipment charge. Cooldown is 75 seconds. This is just a top tier perk effect on the Techmarine. I mean, equipment in Space Marine 2 is just so strong that not having equipment regen just feels so much worse in this game. I wish that things like Augmented Tarantula were as powerful as this perk, but I mean, Melt-A-Bombs, Shock Nades, Pyroblaster canisters, they're just that good. Next perk here is your choice of Fortifying Salvo, Strategic Gun Strike, or the perk counter-offensive protocols. I think the armor restoration here on a 30-second cooldown is very powerful. Like I mentioned before, Techmarine is very squishy, so having any source of armor regen is incredibly potent for him, and a lot of people think that because they are taking this perk, they're going to be just shooting Minoris all the time on accident and not be wasting their servo gun basically, but the way that the precision enhancement works is that it will target Majoris no matter what first, and also things like Extremis, because it does not matter if you take Strategic Gun Strike, it will always go for like the Tyranid Warrior in the lethal perimeter first. Now, the other option here is counter-offensive protocols. A 35% melee damage buff, for 10 seconds is a pretty good option, but this is mainly good for stuff like bosses, because most of the Extremis, if you do put down your servo gun, they're going to be spawning with bosses during the operations anyways in the hard strats, and also you will just nuke them down with the actual lethal perimeter half the time, and the damage buff here is pretty negligible against things like Majoris, because Majoris get comboed by you just off of a parry into things like your servo gun strike and furious gun strikes buff anyways. So if you don't want to take this, if you value the armor restoration more, this is definitely stronger for survivability, but this one's definitely better for your overall melee damage. Next perk here is lethal perimeter. The servo gun marks a zone and automatically attacks enemies that enter it using 50% less energy per shot. This is just the best signature perk for precision enhancement. Decapitating stratagem wastes your servo gun all the time. It is not remotely as good as this one. This one also allows you to just have way more control over where your shots actually go, because you can just pinpoint this like an Auspex scan on a Neurothrope or on things like a Zoanthrope and not waste your shots, where alternatively decapitating stratagem, might just shoot some random ass spore mine that you didn't want in the first place with no real way to like force it to change. And because of that, a lethal perimeter I think is just much better for like all build setups on precision enhancement. Now, as far as the prestige perks go, I just take chained headshots here because headshot damage is very nice on the heroic heavy bolt rifle. If you don't want that, you could skip over it for just going straight into unflinching focus and stim boost, but the way I set this up is chain headshots, unflinching focus because this perk is pretty much mandatory for sentry guns to be good, into stim boost for a 40% HP buff, and then I pick up furious gun strike. Now, furious gun strike is super strong on the Salamander power sword because it's just a free melee damage buff for like your basic loop where you parry an enemy, you gun strike them, you stagger them, you have a 25% buff active for 5 seconds, and it feels incredible. Do a ton of damage, and I think this one is overall the best. Though if you're really conservative with your build, you can skip over chained headshots and go into unflinching focus instead, into stim boost, into defensive stance for a total potential of 45% range damage reduction on top of things like Omnisci and Axe deflection, and then still pick up furious gun strike at the very end to get your melee damage off. But that's pretty much all there is for this build, guys. I mean, the big change here from the strongest build is really just the Salamander's Power Sword. If you don't want to take the Heroic Plasma, you can just swap this out. This is not mandatory by any means, but the big weapons I would really take on this are the Heroic Heavy Bolt Rifle and, of course, the Salamander's Power Sword, because the build set up for the Salamander's Power Sword. And that's all I have to say in this video. Those are the best builds for every single class on the Salamander's Power Sword with Assault, Bulwark, and Techmarine, and this weapon just kind of slaps. I know a lot of you guys don't like the fact it doesn't have a burn effect. Maybe they'll add that one day, but even without that, a 300% damage buff, that is a big number, and it does big damage. And hopefully this guide helped you. And if you like content like this, subscribe for more. And if you want to watch me live testing questions about the game or just come hang out, you find me here on YouTube or on Twitch with a link in the video description. I'll also have a link to my community Discord. And as always, thank you for watching. Take it easy. Bye.